What up guys, it is Justice here and welcome to another Runescape video, this one again focused on the high level mobs, the Living Wyverns. So as you guys know, the video which I made on the first day of release when Wyverns came out referred to a guide of how to do it and all the information, the best knowledge that I could gather within the first day of release to produce a guide for you. And that's received now close to 17,000 views, which is crazy. So thank you every single one of you who have watched that video. But now it has been a few days. I have reached 1,000 kill count at the Wyverns, but I'm going to get into that in more detail when I do finally get my crossbow. So I am on a crossbow hunt right now for the tier 85 Wyvern crossbow. But this video is focused on an up-to-date guide for the Living Wyverns. And a big shout out to a guy called Chi who has created a YouTube video on this. He's actually a follower on Twitch, YouTube, things like that. PMs me a lot, also on Twitter. And a big shout out to this guy because he's one of the first who came across how useful a shield can be at Wyverns. So big props to him for this video which I'm about to create. So this is an up-to-date guide at Living Wyverns, how to get 170 plus kills per hour here. No food needed, only for emergency healing if you accidentally get 2 or more Wyverns on you at once due to using the fire breath ability, and that can happen time to time. But other than that, this is a very efficient method here at Living Wyverns. And this is aimed at high-level PVMers who can understand this video and the content and have the appropriate gear to actually carry out this method. So the new method of killing the Living Wyverns refers to shield switching appropriately, dual wielding when appropriate, wearing tank gear, and also getting the right balance between hot and cold whilst in this area. And you can judge that by how much you're getting poisoned. So it does take skill. And before I even get into this, there's a cavern chill marker at the bottom left hand corner of the screen, and that indicates that you are within this area, you're under the cavern chill effect. However, there's no tiers on there, and when this first came out, I was like, Jax, can you please bring out like tiers so we know how cold we are? However, now actually after doing this method, it takes skill to actually figure out how cold you are and to manage that, and you can manage it by looking at how much you're getting hit by the poison. So as soon as you enter the area, don't even go near a fire, don't ignite one, just wait until the poison, goes down to 0 so you're not being poisoned anymore. You can do this by literally, after you've killed about 5 Wyverns really quickly in a quick succession of each other, the poison should be removed by that point. When you are first stunned, all you have to do is just hit freedom, run to a fire, ignite it, and then stay there until you first receive the message on the screen that states a strong Wyvern poison begins eroding your bones. As soon as you get that message on the screen, you will start getting hit poison, quickly move away, and you'll only start getting hit poison of like 18, maybe 22 damage, which is extremely minimal. Don't stay there too long at the fire, otherwise it does increase in damage very, very quickly. So just stay away again from the fire until you get stunned once, use freedom, go back to the fire. That's the easiest way of keeping track of it, but eventually you do get a sixth sense and you can just keep moving back and to from the fire almost without even ever being poisoned and without ever being stunned. That's when you know you've got it. And this method allows you to do it because you're constantly soul splitting. You can easily go back to the fire if you need to. You can easily hit freedom and get out of a tough predicament. So this method is fantastic for that. It's all about balancing the situation, being right in the middle of the Wyverns and just going crazy, killing them all. It's fantastic. So let's get into this method. On the screen you will see me using this method multiple times, getting kill after kill without any respite really between them, which is why you're getting so many per hour. But we're first going to get into real detail here, and we're going to look at the action bar that I've got set up. I've got Revolution on, which means I can use my defensive abilities more easier, and it doesn't feel too agonizing when you're doing this hour after hour if you are grinding it out. I do use full manual though about 50%, 60% of the time. I do hit the keybinds, however occasionally I will leave my abilities to cast by themselves, which is why Revolution is so great. This is after all a Slayer task. So if you look at the Revolution bar, I'm going to go through each ability I've got on there. I feel like this bar works out really well for me. So I've got Impact on there first, and the reason why I've got Impact on is because that stun blocks the Wyverns. Any stuns you can get off, the better. The more stuns you can get off, the better. So I've got impact on my action bar. I've then got fire breath, which to be honest you could put forward if you want to and not have it there, but I do like the damage output which fire breath gives you. You've just got to be so careful because occasionally you will get a couple of wyverns on you at once. You've got to be careful when you use that ability because the radius is huge. I then have Corruption Blast, which is a new raid ability. This is fantastic if it does hit well. The bleed over time effect can stack up to a lot. I then have Sacrifice because that does deal 110% basic ability damage, and with it, it also gives you a nice little heal out of any hit that you give. I then have Concentrated Blast, but I did actually remove that later on whilst doing this method. I actually swapped it for Tuskar's Wrath, which is a world event ability from the Tusker world event, and again, that gives you 110% base ability damage, and it's better than Concentrated Blast for this situation because you do have your shield equipped fairly often, and Concentrated Blast is a dual wield ability that takes time, especially when using Revo and you can't cut off the second hit. And then the rest of my action bar is again just my thresholds. So I've got my Asphyxiate there, I've got my Wild Magic, and I do have a rack there on number 5, on number S, sorry, keybinder, just in case I run out of basics and I'm not concentrating as much. So that's the action bar. You're not going to be using ultimates at all throughout this method. And in terms for the defensive abilities, you just want to make sure they're accessible for you. So on my screen, I have them all laid out there on the bottom right hand corner of the screen. I know exactly where all my defensive abilities are due to almost muscle memory because I've been doing it so much and clicking them in that position. So I've got my Resonance there, which I use fairly often, Reflect, got my Debilitate. Everything's nicely lined up for me just to click. So I do click my abilities, my defensive abilities, and I know lots of people who do that. Lots of people will have a DPS rotation on their action bar and then will manually click their defensives, and I'm the same. You can technically have 2 action bars now set up and you can keybind all of your defensives if you want to, but I personally prefer clicking my defensive abilities. I use a secondary action bar for any of those extra abilities that I might forget to use and I need to put them on there so they're right there in my face, such as Storm Shards and Shatter. And again, that's only when I'm doing high level PVM such as a Raxor. Anyway, so let's get on to the prayers and the gear and inventory. So there's lots to cover, flipping heck. Guides, there's so much to cover, isn't there? So we'll have a look at the prayer. So as you can see, I'm using Protect Item, planning on not dying, hopefully. I've got my Soul Split on, I've got my Torment on, and this is one prayer now, which a lot of you might not know what it is. I've said it in a couple of my videos in the past, mostly though only the Seren Spell and Prayers video, which I made when the Seren Quest came out. So I'm using the Dark Form prayer, and that's what the purple ring is around me. It's called Dark Form, and it doubles the chances of the Ancient Spell's effect activating when using abilities. So the ability, the spell that I'm using right now is Blood Burst. I'm not using Blood Barrage because they both, I've been told they both have the same damage output. They both heal you 5% of what you hit. And we're not wanting to kill multiple enemies here. We're only wanting to target one wyvern. And if you accidentally use an auto attack with Blood Barrage and there's a couple of wyverns close to each other, you will cast it on multiple wyverns and you'll have multiple attacking you. You only want to be targeting one wyvern at a time with this method. In terms of your gear setup, just make sure you've got the best tank gear that you can wield because you are going to be tanking a lot of hits, and because the wyverns are weak to fire spells anyway and you're using Blood Burst, you're pretty much hitting every single hit. The accuracy is fantastic. So as you can see in my gear setup, I've got Sea Singers and a combination of Acto Primeval gear from raids. Acto gear does not degrade, does degrade but doesn't degrade to dust outside of raids. Don't use normal Primeval gear. I made that mistake for a little while and realized that actually when you're outside of raids, normal Primeval gear does degrade to dust, so you don't want that to happen. I only use normal Primeval gear when I'm actually raiding. Aura, the best aura to use with this method is Penance Aura because your prayer is going to drain extremely quickly. I'm also using Scrimshaw of Elements, but again, you don't need to use a Scrimshaw. And I'm using a Ring of Death, but you could use an Asylum Ring instead if you wish to do so. And in terms of the weapons, I'm actually using dual seismics, and this is actually a Slayer situation where you're going to want to use seismics over a Noxious Staff, over two-hander weapons. So if you can't afford dual seismics, which are absolutely incredible here, then dual Virtus or go for the tier 85 dual seismic Sea Singer's Wand and Orb, which you can get from ports, or you're just going to have to stick with the Virtus Wand and Book, and I'm sure that'll work absolutely fine. You're just not going to be getting as many kills per hour. But if I was to say, is it better than dual Drygores? It probably will work out better than Drygore still if you use dual Virtus, because you're constantly attacking Wyverns all of the time with minimal respite. So now moving on to the inventory. I've not even got into the actual method of ability rotations yet. So if you look on the actual inventory now, I actually adjusted this over the hour. Over the course of me testing this, I actually adjusted my inventory as I went. So I actually banked 3 times because I wanted to adjust my invent, and I still managed to get 170 kills per hour with banking. So in terms of my inventory, I've got 2 doses, so 2 Supreme Overload Flasks, because you can stay here for an hour with this method, 2 Super Perennials, I've got 2 Wormfire Potion Flasks, I've got like 3 Brew Flasks just in case, I've got like 3 attacking me at once, which I might show on this video, which was just mental, and then Sharks, actually, because the Wyverns do drop Sharks, so if you are having to eat, you can just pick up the Sharks, and I've got Sharks in my action bar instead of Rocktails or Rocktail Soups. Now, you also do want to take a Yak. I mean, you can take a Steel Titan. If you really master this, take a Steel Titan. But to be honest, you can get lots of quick kills per hour or efficient kills even with a Yak here, because with a Yak you can take it as your backup. And the reason why I'm saying take a Yak is because you've got Dark Form Prayer, you've got Soul Split, you've got Torment, you've got so much prayer drain with this setup that your prayer is going to just diminish so quickly, especially if you are using an arcane shield, which I forgot to say, I'm using an arcane spirit shield because I've got penance. But make sure if you've not got penance and it runs out, use a tier 90 merciless kite shield. But anyway, your prayer drains extremely quickly, so I was adjusting my inventory, you know, a lot throughout this testing, whilst testing this method. And to be honest, I would say just fill your Yak with the food, have like 2 or 3 spaces in your invent to transfer that food into your invent if and when needed, and then fill the rest of your inventory with Restore Flash 6s, because you are going to need a lot of prayer. Now, this method and Wyverns as a whole is quite costly in terms of the gear and the supplies that you are using, and it almost makes you think, why are we doing this? It's because we're going for the crossbow. I'm personally doing this out of principle to get the crossbow. I can sell it for like 80 to 90 mil. It's a nice little cash stack towards my 1 bill cash stack series. But yeah, they do need to drop the they do need to buff the drop table, and I will be, you know, debating that on another video. But yeah, that's the inventory, guys. That's the gear. That's the action bar. 10 minutes into the video, let's get into the actual ability rotation now and how to think when you're fighting these Wyverns. Okay, so all you need to do is follow these principles of when to use dual wield over using your shield, and then you will be able to consistently and efficiently get kills and stay here for a long time without the need to eat, only in emergency situations. So when you first enter the area, you're going to want to keep your shield on. You've got no adrenaline, so you can't do any vigorous stun blocks with asphyxiate or deep impact, so you just want to keep your shield on and build up your adrenaline. So whenever you have your shield on, which will be a lot of the time, you want to always use resonance. So prioritize resonance, especially if you have low life points. So resonance, and then after you use resonance, you want to use preparation, which is the ability towards the bottom of the screen. You want to use preparation, and that will reduce the cooldown of resonance, and therefore you can use it more often. Also, when you've got your shield active, if you are low life points and you don't have any stuns, if they're all on cooldown, you want to be using Reflect. Reflect reduces damage taken by 50%, and it's extremely useful here at the Wyverns, and it also reflects damage onto the Wyvern itself. So let's say you get hit around a 700, that would reflect like a 1400 onto the Wyvern, which is really great to see. So those are the 3 main defensive abilities that you will be using whilst you've got your shield active. Now, you will only switch to dual wield. Now, only switch to dual wield if you've debilitated, which is a defensive ability that reduces damage taken by 50% even when dual wielded. So only dual wield if you've debilitated, or if you've done a basic impact ability stun on the Wyvern, which means you won't be taking incoming damage because the Wyvern will be stun blocked. So a nice little DPS rotation when you're dual wielded is using impact, deep impact, which stuns it again, and then asphyxiate, which constantly stuns it whilst you're in the animation of asphyxiate, which gives 3 hits onto the Wyvern, and then you could finish it off with, let's say, a wild magic. That is a really nice DPS rotation where you will take minimal incoming damage. And then if you need to, switch to your shield and hit off another resonance with a preparation to reduce the cooldown on that resonance. So it's all about being smart in the situation, having your shield equipped most of the time, never dual wielding unless the wyvern is stun blocked or if you're debilitated. Otherwise you're just going to take too much damage, which isn't worth it, and you're not going to be able to soul split it back up. And that is how you do the wyverns. And people probably are wondering, you know, why haven't you mentioned the demon horn necklace and the bone crusher? Well, the bone crusher for me is on my slayer belt and it's automatically burying the wyvern's bones, but I do not use a demon horn here. I've actually tested it out, and to be honest, the amulet of souls does come out on top when comparing it to the demon horn necklace, which would in fact charge your prayer points up. But the amulet of souls gives you extra healing, gives you extra heals whilst you're soul splitting, and you do feel the impact here because you are constantly soul splitting big hits from the wyverns when you're using, let's say, your asphyxiate or wild magics or deep impacts when you're dual wielded. So it is worth using an amulet of souls here over a demon horn necklace. Make sure to use your enhanced Excalibur as well. Those heals over time really does make a big difference. It's like 4,400 life points that will heal over time when you've got that enhanced Excalibur effect active. And whilst you're killing these, your blood burst is also healing you whilst using dark form, like I said earlier, which doubles the effectiveness of that spell when you're using it. And that's pretty much it. So, you know, if you want, because at the start of this video I was just discussing inventory and gear setups, just backtrack, watch through the video just to watch the actual footage of me killing it. You will pick up the methods that I'm using and the thought processing that is going through whilst I'm killing these. I really do hope you found this useful. I love the fact that, you know, people have came across this method and now I've came across it, because it really does make this boss even more enjoyable than what it already was. Like with melee, you know, you would get consistent kills. The reason I do still stick to my original guide because it is more accessible to a higher amount of people, and that's why that guide is still very useful, because it's a melee gear setup, especially if you prefer melee anyway here. It's definitely worthwhile, like guide still. It's more accessible and it's less risky. But once you do focus on the magic method, you've got a dual gear setup, a dual magic gear setup, and you actually put a bit more focus on this. You do need to be focusing to do this method. Like melee you can get away with not focusing. This one does require more attention. So if you were going to compare melee to magic, I would say melee is more accessible, less risky, but magic is a lot quicker. But you just have to be a lot more focused to get through it effectively and to make sure it is efficient. Otherwise, you're going to be eating loads and having to bank loads, and then it will become inefficient. Thank you guys for watching this updated guide for high-level PVMers out there, or anyone who wants to give this a go. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next one.